Hey guys, welcome back to my channel and I hope you're doing well. So in today's video I wanted to share my revision tips on how I got an A star in psychology this year, and yeah, hopefully it's useful, and let's get started. The first thing that I did was using mind maps, and because it is funny, I haven't planned this very well, you might not be able to see them. With these mind maps, I used a spec which I printed out, and you can get that on like your official exam board website. So I did Edexcel, and I literally went through it from the whole of 2 years, and I created a mind map for each topic. I started it from February half term and went through everything, and I thought I would show you an example of what I did for a study. So I'd have, if I needed to, like a bit of background knowledge. I'd then have the sample, because that is important, the aim, the procedure, the experiment, results, conclusion and evaluation. And by making it so simple and easy to read, you're going to keep going over and over and then just keep testing yourself. And this works for everything. So even if there was like a process like learning how the multi-stool model works, I'd still do that, because I'd have the little processes with studies that show that that works or that doesn't work, and like evaluation. I also did it for research methods. It didn't take very long. Research methods there. Look at the spec. Yeah? Oh, I forgot what I was going to say. Sorry, my mom came and now I've forgotten what I said. So for research methods, I did it in the same way. And it's really simple, and using the spec again, I worked out how many different research methods I needed to know, and I'd write it at the top and then do advantages, disadvantages, but also what it involves. So for example, if it was like a cross-sectional study, I wrote that it's with a large group of people with an arrow saying from a target population, take a sample of different ages and get a snapshot of behaviour. That is it. I also did the same thing for sampling techniques. So I wrote the definition, then advantages and disadvantages. And for brain scanning techniques, I also wrote that, because I used to forget this a lot. So I wrote like how the procedure worked for a CAT scan, a PET scan and MRI. And it helped me because I've had 2 out of the 3 scans, so it was easy for me to remember. The day before the exam, or like a week before the exam, let's say I came across something new to do with that topic, I'd use a post-it note. Because I had discovered a textbook, I think it was a textbook or online website, a few weeks before the exam, so I kind of went through my notes again, like a mind map, because this was my main revision, and kind of added it on there. So while I was doing the mind map, I was also going through the extra key detail that I needed to know. And this is really easy for you to keep testing yourself, because you can use a whiteboard, which is what I used. I kept mine just for these videos. And what I would do, I would literally write out the headings from my mind maps, for example, aim, procedure, and I'd write out how much I can remember on my whiteboard, cross-check it with this and keep adding it and like keep going over it. For issues and debates, which I felt was probably the hardest, only because I didn't really revise for that. Like, a lot of people did a lot of revision for that, but I didn't really do that until the lead up to the exam, but I didn't think I needed to, because it's all to do with understanding content. And we had 12 issues and debates. And what I did, when I had finished learning all the content, I created a table like this, and I obviously had a lot more, and it had all the issues and debates at the top. So this had 6 of them, and the other documents I had the other 6. So for example, it had ethics, practical issues, reductionism, and so on. And it had all the different studies, because for paper 3 you needed to know particular issues and debates for studies. And I also did that, but for general topics. So I wrote biological learning, clinical, all of the topics with the issues and debates. I did that like this. So I wrote all the issues and debates going down, this like this, and the topics going this way. And I'd write out the main things to do with that. As you can tell, there isn't much information, because if you have a lot of information like I did here, I want to see the difference, you're not going to be able to learn that. Like, imagine reading this the day before the exam and how many you'd have of these. Like, I managed to condense this into that, and it's just so easy. Like, the day before the exam, as you can tell, I literally highlighted it after I read it, and it's just easy to kind of go over. About a month before the exam, another revision thing I did was create tables, and I created a table for paper 1 of all the studies that I needed. So I separated it into 4 of social, cognitive, biological and learning, highlighted the classic and contemporary studies, because obviously they were quite important. And the other ones were like, you know, in essays, if you ever need to mention them as a strength or a weakness or for evaluation. And this was really good because I'd test myself with, do I know every single one on this? For example, in learning, we learned about phobias. You don't need to know every single person who said phobias are great. You need to know a few and a few who said they weren't. And so I would remember 2 or 3 and I'd write that down. So these are the people I would remember. And it saves me time having to go and research more people, because I'm like, I only need to know these 3 and these are the only people I am going to know. So yeah, I don't know if you can see that. And I did the same thing for A2 topics. So this was clinical and crim, and because these had a lot more topics, I kind of broke them down into all the different topics from the spec. And I wanted to show you also my notes, because I used to, in year 12 for all my subjects, I used to do it as PowerPoint notes, and I had never gone over them. They were a waste of time. And then I kind of changed it, and I literally did it so simple, as you can see here. And with this spec, I wrote the main types. So I wrote brain injury is one of the explanations, key phrases, which is important in the exam, and that's kind of what I would remember. And this is mixing with class notes. The evidence, so studies, as you can see here, and evaluation on the back, and that is it. And then from that, I will turn it into the mind map later on. This is another one for methods. So I spent a bit more time on methods because I kind of struggled on that in terms of like remembering stuff. And this was a really useful document to have because when I was learning or doing past paper questions, this was quite easy for me to go over, and it's so simple because I had like literally the definition, advantages, disadvantages, and like the different what like independent variable, dependent variable means and stuff like that. Another revision thing that I did was before the exam, like a day before for paper 3 and probably a few days before paper 1 and 2, I did post-it notes, and this was so useful. Even though I didn't really read over it much, the whole process of doing it was quite useful. For example, I had a table for qualitative and quantitative data. It's so simple, and it was stuck up on this wall, so easy for me to kind of look at while working. And like for example, the different types of observations that we need to know with advantages and disadvantages. It's just going through everything. You want to go into the exam knowing that you have gone through everything that is asked for. You don't want to go in the exam saying, I should have done this, because it could have come up, and you don't want to take that risk. Whereas by doing everything, let's say if I didn't memorize all of it, you know you went into that exam and you've got an idea of some sort of thing that you can talk about. And in paper 3, there's questions on issues and debates and comparisons and like all of that. So what I did was I literally did a table of the different studies, comparing them. So for example, like Watson and Rayner and Sheriff, and I did that for everything. So I crossed all the different studies that were possible and just kept doing that. And I wanted to talk about past papers and how to kind of use them effectively with psychology. I think with psych, out of all of them, it reminded me of like GCSE science in a way that past papers are very important and they kind of keep repeating it. You don't need to really do this. I did it only because it's easier for me to kind of have a physical copy rather than using like a screen. I went through every single question from 2008 on the edXL website, and you could see a pattern, and I basically did every single question, and whichever ones I found hard or I knew kept coming up, I'd print out the mark scheme for it. The mark scheme was kind of the answer to everything. For example, there's a question on evaluate Bandura. That same study is what we needed to know in our new spec, obviously with a little bit more detail, but it gives you the basics. And I literally could just read through that, try and test myself, and then add it onto my mind maps if I needed to using a post-it note. I would 100% recommend you doing this because it's so useful. And even if you don't do every question, even though you should, you're going to get used to kind of writing it out and kind of understanding what they want in a simplified way, because you don't have enough time in an exam to go on and on and on. You have to keep it short and sweet. But can you see, like the multi-skill model, I printed this out. That's all I needed to know from the multi-skill model. And when I went through mark schemes, this was basically the same for most years when they kept asking it. So I'd print this off, go highlight the key stuff, put it on a mind map, and then stick it on top, put it on a post-it note, then add it on my mind map, and that's how easy and useful this was. Also, you can make up your own questions in psychology. You can literally make up so many. Alright, my friend. For example, there's a past paper question and evaluate the multi-store model. You can change that to any of the memory models. Like, there are so many people who are like, oh, I haven't seen this question before in our exams, but like, you could have made them up. Like, I literally found an online sheet for those past paper exams. But once I did this, I literally made them up. Like, for example, it was like, assess the usefulness of using experiments in cognitive research. Change the word cognitive to social research, to clinical research, and then that way you've gone through everything. Like, you can just make up the questions and then answer it as 8 markers. And I tried every possible 8 marker, and I just made them up and kept doing them on my whiteboard. And you don't even always have to write them out in a full, like, A-star, like, essay. You can write bullet points and then add around it. Like, it's just doing these things will help you get the A-star in the end. For example, practicals. If you come across a practical question, like, for example, our teacher gave this sheet for biological practical questions in year 12. You can change the word biological to any of the other practicals in your spec. So, for example, describe the procedure of your biological practical. I changed the word to biological to social and all the other ones, and I wrote out answers like this, if you can see. Like, I've done it for all of them. So you just have to change it. If you had a chance to improve your biological practical, explain what would you do. Change that to explain how you would improve your cognitive practical, if that makes sense. Like, you've got to just keep changing up the questions and just try everything, even the ones you hated, because I hated so much of it, but I'm so glad I went through the hard questions because some of them came up and I was like, oh my god, thank god I tried every single question, and even though I hated it then, it was worth it. And another thing to do with past papers is using them effectively. So when you do a past paper, don't just not do anything about it. Utilize it. It is a key resource. Like, do it so you've got like words and key stuff around it. So like, annotate it. For example, if I got that wrong, I wrote so much around that so that I knew how to improve. And like, even if you get a question right, there is probably more detail you can add, so just add it and like make sure you know there are other stuff. And like, even if it's like a key word you got wrong or something, just add that in so you know for next time, and just making sure you go over it. And even when you get your test papers back, make sure that you literally annotate around that. Like, this is my test. Oh, this is one that I did really badly. I got 30 out of 90 last September. Like, can you just see if I show you how like I've written stuff in there like throughout the paper. So this one, I got like 2 out of 8. So I kind of drew around it, wrote like a diagram to help me remember that question. So you need to go over it properly because it can come up a year later in your actual A-level exam. And while I was talking about the whiteboard before, I also kind of did a mind map of trying to remember how much I knew. So I've done quite a lot of these, this is just a random one. And I literally, using the spec and like I said before, wrote the key headings and tried to see as much as I could recall because it's so important to know everything for psychology. And I wanted to talk about flashcards. A lot of people did them for everything, which is great if it worked for them, whereas for me, flashcards never worked, apart from having like maximum 10, because I would just never go over them. So 3-4 weeks before the exam, any topic I would struggle with or kind of forget, I would write it onto a flashcard. So for example, evaluate the use of case studies. I used to forget the researchers and who was involved. So I'd write out researchers and write advantages and disadvantages. And as you can tell, it's just so simple, and that is all I had. I think I had a few more for psychology, but not that many. And yeah, that's all I did. Just kept it simple and easy for me to test myself on a whiteboard. And lastly, I wanted to talk about how I actually managed to fit in all this revision, like everything's on the floor at the moment. I'm going to come this way because of the lighting. I created a to-do list, so I wrote out the days of my exam at the top, and I kind of treated the 6 different topics, so social, cognitive, biological, learning, clinical and criminal, and then technical issues and debates as different topics, and like as different subjects in a way, because I wanted to make sure I got everything done per subject. So I wrote out everything I needed to do. For example, I wrote table for all the studies, and I needed to do that for all the topics, so that was a separate thing. Then I needed to do my maths for clinical, and I write it all the way there till criminal, and then do my maths for them. Then I had to do that for biological and for basically all the topics. And then I had a separate one for research methods and issues and debates. So it's just a way of kind of keeping track, and I don't know why I didn't highlight any of them, but I did do all of them. So just making sure you've got everything covered from the spec, like every single thing. And yeah, I hope you found this revision video useful, and yeah, hopefully it helps, and I shall see you soon. Bye.